Next on the national desk, a New York City middle school accused of segregating students. We're going to discuss this live with Director of Outreach at Parents Defending Education, Erika Sanzi. An investigation this morning in New York City after reports that a New York City middle school allegedly segregated students by race to, quote, undo the legacy of racism. The Director of Outreach at Parents Defending Education, Erika Sanzi, joining us this morning to discuss. Welcome back to the National Desk, Erika. Great to see you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
The principal of the Lower Manhattan Community Middle School, Shayna Douglas, said in an email that 7th and 8th grade students would be exploring how their racial identity influences their experiences when separated into, quote, affinity groups based on race. Tell me about the complaint your organization filed.
Sure. So we were first made aware of this separating of students by race by a story in the news. So we looked into it and decided that it checked out, and we filed our initial complaint. But we were then contacted by a parent in the school who provided documents to us, not only that showed, again, that they were separating students by race, but also that these groups were mandatory. So we did some follow-up with our complaint, and we added those additional documents to the complaint. And
what are you asking the court to do?
Well, essentially what we need is for this policy to stop, right? So what would the hope is that, as happened under the Obama administration with a high school in Illinois, that they're going to find out that they're violating the Civil Rights Act, right? So they're in violation of Title VI and of the 14th Amendment, and that they cannot separate students by race, and that they're going to have to, move away from this policy. So essentially, our goal is for them to stop the practice.
Right, and bring awareness to this if it's happening. The Lower Manhattan Middle School has a, quote, race mission statement. Can you tell us what that statement is, and what is the school's overall goal for its students?
I actually have that statement in front of me, which I'm now going to scroll down and look for. But essentially, it's that they believe that the legacy of racism and oppression exists not only in the world, but they feel that it exists very much in their school. And they think that in order to undo racism and undo this legacy of what they call racism and oppression, that that by separating students by race and sort of having students almost fixate on their racial identities and the differences between them, that they're going to somehow bring about some sort of solution to this or make the situation better. Whereas what we are seeing, not only in New York, but across the country, is that separating students and staff, because that's another common practice, by race, is really having a poisonous effect on schools. And because it highlights differences, it sows distrust, and it is especially problematic for children who are biracial and whose parents are of different races. The parents we hear from who are the most upset about this are parents who are in an interracial marriage raising biracial children, because this idea that they have to identify with one group or another and fixate on their racial differences really flies in the face of what their family represents and also how their parents are raising them.
I want to go back to what you're saying, because back in 2019, during the Obama administration, the Office of Civil Rights found that this similarly racially segregated event in a Chicago area school was a civil rights violation. Can you talk us through that case again?
Yeah, so the school, I think it was in Oak Park, Illinois, they had an assembly, and they decided that the assembly was only for Black students, and they were explicit that students that identified as white were not allowed to attend. That is obviously a clear violation, again, of Title VI and of the 14th Amendment. You cannot exclude people from activities, particularly in a public school, based on the color of their skin. And so, it was made clear to them that they had to make sure that all of their activities, including assemblies, would be open to all students, regardless of their race. And essentially, that's exactly what we think the Office of Civil Rights is going to find about this middle school in New York. I mean, it's one of the most sordid pieces of American history was that we separated and segregated people based on their race. So to see schools using this practice under the guise of undoing racism, it's not just that it's nonsensical, it's that it's really, really can do a lot of harm. And again, what we're seeing across the board in schools that are doing this is not positive. It is having a bad, negative, and toxic effect on the families in that district and on students and staff.
All right, we appreciate you joining us this morning, Erika, and it's a story we will continue to follow up on. Thank you.
Thank you.